Oh, violet flame, come violet flame, now blaze and blaze and blaze. Oh, violet flame, come violet flame, to raise and raise and raise the earth and all thereon, the earth and all thereon, the earth and all thereon. Oh, violet flame, come violet flame, now blaze and blaze and blaze. Oh, violet flame, come violet flame, to raise and raise and raise the children and their teachers, the children and their teachers, the children and their teachers. Oh, violet flame, come violet flame, now blaze and blaze and blaze. Oh, violet flame, come violet flame, to raise and raise and raise the plants and elemental creatures, the plants and elemental creatures, the plants and elemental creatures. Oh, violet flame, come violet flame, now blaze and blaze and blaze. Oh, violet flame, come violet flame, to raise and raise and raise the air, the sea, the land, the air, the sea, the land, the air, the sea, the land. Oh, violet flame, come violet flame, now blaze and blaze and blaze. Oh, violet flame, come violet flame, to raise and raise and raise. Make all to understand, make all to... Oh, violet flame, come violet flame, now blaze and blaze and blaze. Oh, violet flame, come violet flame, to raise and raise and raise. Bless all thy Amrita's hand, bless all thy Amrita's hand, bless all thy Amrita's hand. Oh, violet flame, come violet flame, now blaze and blaze and blaze. Oh, violet flame, come violet flame, to raise and raise and raise. I am, I am, I am, the fullness of God's plan, fulfilled right now and forever. I am, I am, I am, the fullness of God's plan, fulfilled right now and forever. I am, I am, I am, the fullness of God's plan, fulfilled right now and forever.
Let us be aware tonight of the eternal verities. The world and the individual are both cloaked with obscurity whenever the eternal verities do not manifest in our consciousness. Whenever we are lost in a world of suspicion, of darkness, of mistrust, of the plans of the infinite, whenever we are confused by the chaos of the world, whenever we are uncertain, it is a matter of obscurity being cast across our pathway. And let us be aware that this obscurity does not come from or derive from God or goodness. This obscurity comes from the human realm, from the cocoon of mortal ignorance. It comes from a lack of knowledge of what life really is. Life is not darkness. Life is not chaos or confusion. Life is not an uncertain probing. Life is magnificent, even biologically. The construction of the body, even our flesh and bones, they are beautifully formed, intricately and wonderfully. And the brain, itself a recipient of the impulses of the mind, is a magnificent switching complex and a storehouse of infinite truth. Think then, just pause and think of not only the flesh and blood, but of the consciousness, which rests in the chalice of identity. The consciousness rests in the chalice of identity and gives identity to the chalice. We are aware of ourself, and we are also aware of a power outside of ourselves that also is identifiable within. There is a power within ourselves that defines right and wrong when all moral codes fall short of the mark. There is an innate sense of justice that is inside of us, superior in all of its rights and ramifications to all codes that man has through the years manufactured, sometimes out of great wisdom, and then again manufactured out of the complexity of word knowledge, a mere assimilation of facts and figures which are thrown together without rhyme or reason, and because they have been accepted by humankind, precedence is established, whether justice is served by it or not. And so the whole human race today requires and needs to lean not upon the arms of flesh, upon mere mortal wisdom, but upon spiritual treasures that are to be found within the heart. They are within the heart, and they can be drawn forth to illumine the mind, to cast the light of truth upon the screen of the mind. And when they do, when this light is cast upon the screen of the mind, it changes our whole viewpoint, because today the majority of humankind are governed by emotion, energy moving according to preconceived sensitivity, energy moving according to ideas that we have held or that others have held. Not always wise, but many times, in fact most times, central to our ego. We ourselves have an id, an identity, a central focus of awareness. We call it our self. This awareness of our self is in a state of becoming, because it is already demonstrated to us that change is being wrought from day to day. We know that the I of today is not the I of yesterday. The consciousness of today is not the consciousness of yesterday, nor will it be the same consciousness tomorrow. It will either retrogress, hopefully not, or it will move forward. And if it moves forward, then certainly the self takes on new meaning. But this new meaning can be cast either in the light of the personal ego, where we are constantly struggling for recognition from our fellow men, our peers, or it can be a matter of the illumination of our God identity. And the God identity engulfs, if we will permit it, the human. And when it does so, we no longer care for the same transient things, the same transient desires. Little by little they fade away. They lose their meaning, and we take on in our consciousness new desires. It is very strange when we read the story of the Good Samaritan, how that he came upon the wayfarer, laying there upon the ground, wounded and bruised, a man he knew not, a man for whom he had formed no attachments, a man who could not reward him, just a man laying there. What did he do? In his richness and his wisdom and his strength and his sense of knowing who he was, he stepped out from this awareness of the self to serve the ends of someone he did not know. And he bound up the wounds, and he gave him comfort and water, and took him upon his horse and rode him to an inn and paid the fee for the man's lodging so he could have a comfortable bed to rest in. This was an act outside of the self. It was a concern other than the immediate concern of his own needs. It was reflective of his recognition of a need to serve others, and not for the glorification of the ego, not to be identified with some great movement, some surge, not necessarily Christ-like, but to simply do, to simply act on behalf of a fellow human being who was in need. And by his act, he identified more closely with the goodness of God, who had already stated through Christ that it is wise sometimes to leave the 99 who are securely within the sheepfold and go in search of that which is lost. The little wandering lamb, the little wandering sheep that is caught in the brambles and nettles without comfort and without seeming intrinsic worth to the total picture. But somehow or other, we are aware of the fact that when we deal with the Spirit and we deal with God, we are dealing with an infinite power that has awareness of us, whether or not we have awareness of it, of Him. Call Him what you will. He is aware of us, and He seeks to convey to us a higher, a holier, a purer sense, a more beautiful consciousness. Let us then ask ourselves what motivates the action of the Good Samaritan. Love. But love has been defined so many times, and so many times selfishly. Here is love without expectation. We do not even find record that the Good Samaritan thought that he was going to receive some reward in the hereafter for his deed. He simply acted out of the compulsion of the needs of another soul with whom he identified, saying perhaps to himself, "There, but for God's grace, lay I, the victim of thieves and robbers, and I will do what I can for him." Let us realize then that we must always search our hearts for the motives for our actions. And if finding there a selfish motive, if understanding that we are seeking to underwrite ourselves in our charities and kindnesses, we should realize it is not right and proper to condemn ourselves. It is still a higher purpose if I act even selfishly to serve the needs of another than it is to serve just the needs of myself. And man then climbs the stairway to reality, not in one giant leap, but he goes up step by step. He may skip one step here or there, but basically he is always climbing if he is interested in doing so. But it requires motivation from within to consciously climb. Most people today seek to climb socially. They seek to climb financially. They seek to climb the ladder of fame, fortune. It will lead them to a position where they can receive the adulation of others. They want to be honored. And of course, there are times when one thinks in terms of selfishness that is exercised so that one may be later generous. Do you understand? Do you follow me? In other words, people are selfish first so that they later may become generous. Now, I think this is not the highest form of devotion. This is not the highest form of love. But it is a higher form than someone who acts entirely amorally, someone who acts entirely from the standpoint of what will I get out of it? What is in it for me? If we act entirely selfishly, you see, just serving what we think will produce something for us, then we are not very high at all on the spiritual ladder. And all of this may seem to smack of a righteousness that is formulated by what we do or what we think. And I want to say to you that this is only the wick. And the wick stands there in the tallow of matter and substance, and it is meaningless until kindled by the flame of grace. When the grace of God, the purposes of God enfold the mortal, when there is a pulsation of infinite reality that descends and fills the consciousness with a beautiful spirit, the Spirit of God, the Spirit of the Holy Spirit, when all of that surrounds one and one feels it, if the senses are open enough to feel it, then you see the flame has started on the wick. So what I am saying is that the wick is only a structure. These noble aspirations we feel, we want to be a good person, we want to have spiritual grace, our desires are kind. We are motivated either by selfishness that may subsequently become generosity, or we are simply motivated by the desire to love someone, because we feel a need in ourselves to love someone, because reciprocity is usually that which follows from love. When one loves, one is often loved. Although there are many cases of unrequited love, we see that the higher love is not brought forth from this world, but is brought forth from on high. So that if we have not personally had the divine experience, the kindling reality of the sacred fire on the altar of being, then it is a unique and glorious experience that awaits us. It is the coming down of the Spirit of the Most High God and the kindling of the wick. And then we perceive that this burning flame is not something that we created. It was not formulated from dust. It did not actually spring forth from the tallow that is the moment of kindling. Yet it was there all the time, inherently within us. Our minds possess the capacity to be stirred. Our emotions possess the capacity to be stirred. Our being can be shook to the roots by unreality as well as reality. And we have responded to the vibrations of the spoilers many times, who have told us, oh, you don't have a chance. Only the Son of God has a chance, and you're not a son of God. There's only one Son of God, they say. Falser words were never spoken. The Father said that He created man in His own image. Is there a higher image than the image of God? So then, we perceive that way back before Abraham was, I am. These were the words of Jesus. Before Abraham was, I am. Which brings beingness, not only in him, not only in contemporary man, but everyone that has ever lived back to the moment of creation. We were all there. If we have a soul, if we have a spark of God inside of us, we were there at the supreme moment when the first monadic expression was made, when the first man sprung forth. We were there then. Oh yes, we were spiritual. We didn't have this body. We don't have now the memory of that moment thoroughly enlivened within us. Some of us may, but as St. Paul said, I know in part and I see in part. But when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part will be done away with. We can dispense with all our disorderliness, our untidy consciousness, the soot that has marred the expression of the divine image. We can dispense with it all. We can cast aside purse and scrip. We can cast aside our hungers and our desires. We can part with them all once we are engulfed with the divine intent, because I am come that ye might have life, and that more abundantly. When the abundant life is expressing itself within us, the moment that pulsation engulfs us, we are changed from glory to glory. And I want you to take note of this. There is no sudden inspiration of necessity that carries us from the first step to the 33rd step. but the taking of the first step is an act which may not even be preceded by any awareness at all, but comes suddenly upon us. And then for the first time our eyes are opened and we know him. We see that he is there. We see that the Spirit is there, a living, magnificent symbol and real creation. The first begotten, the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. Descending from the cosmic image, the great glyph of the I Am presence, which is above us all. The symbol becomes clothed upon with the reality of the living Christ. And the living Christ steps forth in our consciousness. The Son has returned. Suddenly the Lord has returned to the temple, from which he has never really been apart. It is only that we ourselves, endowed with mortal consciousness, have caught and captured the historical image of monadic man, Neanderthal man, early prehistoric man, and all of these wounded creations that, like mummies, haunt the centuries with darkness, where man was nothing more than an infant spiritually and had no realization of who he really was, because at one point there was a turning into the dark. And in past ages, before the dawn of recorded historical time, the real man stood forth in the ancient mystery temples, and the masters walked the earth and discoursed with men. And they discoursed not nor spoke of darkness, but they spoke of light, and the radiating power of light, the energy of light, the freedom of light, and the capacity of man to express the goodness of God, the desires of God, and to manifest even the magical principles of mastery and dominion over the outer world. Take dominion over the earth. Take dominion over it. This was the command of God. And this we once knew. But today every man sits under his own vine, and every man sits under his own fig tree, feeling no longer a part of the reality of God. He is estranged, as one upon a raft is separated from the mainstream of life. And there, although he feels the physical kinship of the many frequenters of the bar rooms of the world, where the laughter and the music and all of the little untidy desires of human creation are expressed and never satisfied, because they are always a bottomless pit from which no one can possibly derive permanent satisfaction. What then is the answer? The answer lies in the mystery teachings of the mystery schools, not in the church today, whose impotent messages, mind you, are going out to the world only in their distorted forms, seeking social reform, when social reform would automatically come to man once he had received the fullness of infinite grace, or even was, shall we say, immersed in the grace of God. He couldn't help but go out and do good and express good and create just laws to serve his fellow men if he were filled with the Spirit, if he were made in the image of God. And many of the restraining laws of present day time are no more than the leash that restrains the animal from getting away from his master. And today many are breaking the leash. They refuse to be bound, and this is not necessarily good, but then the masters have not demonstrated that they are anything else themselves but men on a leash. In this case, the leash is the headlong desires for domination over humanity. They want control and to be thought wise, and they create movements and they create unrest simply to control the restless masses, and without ever understanding the intent of God and the reality of God, or the mystery temples hidden in the mountains. They don't understand the mystic brotherhoods and the power of the mystic brotherhoods. They do not understand that they will lose their temporal life. Most certainly they will. And if they do not, during the course of that temporal life, achieve some reality, some sense of the power that is within them, and begin to exercise it, they will indeed be cast into outer darkness, and during the period awaiting rebirth will probably glean nothing from the universe except to be like a child within the womb in a state of incubation for physical rebirth, which in no way ever will kindle within them the realities of the Spirit, which must be enlivened and quickened. This is the meaning of the quick and the dead. They are both here amongst us. There are very few that are quick, and there are many who are dead. And we have then a responsibility toward our Creator and toward life to seek out the mystery schools, such as the Summit Lighthouse, because only by attunement with the mystery schools and the true cosmic reality of that message can man today derive the satisfactions and the instructions that will show him in due course of time, if he patiently wait for it, and it does take some time. You can't turn the tide of the centuries in one moment, but you can start. So you see, you need all that. You need all of that instruction, or you are nothing more than a wandering star to whom is reserved the mist of darkness forever. The consciousness is nothing more than a tramp consciousness that goes from haven to haven or place to place without ever gleaning any sense of its purpose or any understanding of what the intrinsic worth of the soul that cannot be weighed by the scales of this life actually is. You can have it. It's here for the asking. I will not beg you, nor any master anywhere in the universe. They are not going to beg you to accept this. This is not a matter of a sawdust trail where you come up to an altar and get down on your knees and beat your breast and say, "Oh Lord, be merciful to me, a sinner." You're not sinners. You simply are not awake. I don't say it to all. I say it to many in the world, because it is so. And I too was a part of that. And by His grace, I was healed of it. And I walked step by step up those stairs. I have not reached the top of the ladder, nor have any that I know reached the top of the ladder, but all are struggling toward the top, moving toward it. The word perhaps should not be struggle in one sense of the word, but still there is always the struggle between the flesh and the spirit. And so we definitely have something to offer. And I do not know, in traveling all over the world, to the farthest reaches of this world, I have not found anything quite like the great White Brotherhood teachings. I have never found such instruction as we have gleaned from the Masters of Wisdom, so pure in its form, so magnificent in its outreach, so unselfish, so completely beautiful, and so demonstrable. You can demonstrate it in your life. And it will change your world. And not for the worse, but for the better. That great exponent of freedom, Saint Germain, whose small, bobtailed biography appears in Encyclopedia Britannica in some stance of error, is himself a great Western adept, known also as a prince of the House of Rikazi, from the House of Rikazi in Hungary, in Transylvania. He is today the greatest exponent of real freedom to humanity that you will ever find on this planet. Saint Germain, together with Jesus the Christ, are architects of this age. And they are lovingly, willingly, joyously extending their help to humanity. But the law says, "Call unto me and I will answer you." We don't ask you to make a public display of yourself. You can call in your own heart to God. And no one need know it unassended. And they will answer you. They have promised. And we have seen the results in a fiery demonstration of joy and happiness and wisdom and an influx of beauty into the lives of our people. And all that we have we offer to the world without money and without price.